The rain hammered my garage roof like bullets on tin, each drop reminding me that even the weather had it out for me these days. I was elbow-deep in the guts of my '67 Mustang, trying to coax life back into her carburetor, when the front door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. "Dad's a loser!" Sophie screamed from the driveway, her 17-year-old voice cutting through the storm. "Mom deserves better than this dump." I didn't look up. Kid had a point, even if it stung like hell. Our house looked like something that had given up on life. Peeling paint, sagging gutters, a lawn that had surrendered to dandelions. Not exactly the palace my CEO wife had dreamed of when she married the neighborhood boxer 20 years ago. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Through the open kitchen window, I heard Rebecca's voice, low and breathy. The tone she used to use with me, back when she still pretended to care. "Of course I want to see you tonight, Marcus. He's completely clueless." I froze, wrench halfway to my mouth to hold the flashlight. Marcus. The name hit me like a sucker punch to the gut. "He spends all his time with that stupid car," Rebecca continued, her voice dripping with disgust. "Honestly, sometimes I forget he even lives here." The wrench slipped from my teeth and clattered to the concrete floor. 20 years of marriage, and this was how she talked about me to some guy named Marcus. I wiped my hands on an old rag, my mind racing faster than my Mustang ever could. Mrs. Pruitt's curtains twitched across the street. The old bat never missed anything, especially drama. She'd probably been watching this whole show unfold for months while I played the oblivious husband. I walked into the house, tracking motor oil across Rebecca's pristine white tiles. She was in the living room, phone pressed to her ear, wearing that black dress that cost more than my monthly car parts budget. "I have to go," she whispered, then hung up quickly. Too quickly. "Who was that?" I asked, though I already knew the answer would be a lie. "Just work stuff." She didn't even look at me. "You're getting oil everywhere, David. Can't you clean up before you come inside?" "Sorry." I wasn't sorry. Not anymore. "Long day at the office?" "You have no idea what real work is like." She gathered her purse, keys jingling. "I'm going to dinner with the board. Don't wait up." She brushed past me, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and contempt. The front door clicked shut with the finality of a coffin lid. I stood there in my own living room, feeling like a stranger. The family photos on the mantel mocked me, Rebecca's smile growing more forced in each successive year, Sophie looking increasingly embarrassed to be seen with her old man, and me, always slightly out of focus, like I was already disappearing. My phone buzzed. Text from Frank, my old boxing coach. "Heavy bags waiting for you, champ. Come work out whatever's eating you." Frank knew me too well, but tonight, I wasn't in the mood to punch leather. Tonight, I had some detective work to do. I fired up my laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Marcus. How many Marcuses could there be in Rebecca's corporate world? I started with her company's website, scrolling through executive photos and board members. There he was, Marcus Thornton, venture capitalist, all perfect teeth and silver hair. The kind of guy who wore $1,000 suits and never had motor oil under his fingernails. The kind of guy Rebecca had always wished she'd married instead of me. His bio read like a romance novel. Harvard MBA, multiple successful startups, divorced, no kids, available, everything I wasn't. I clicked through to his social media. There she was, in photo after photo. Rebecca at charity galas, Rebecca at wine tastings, Rebecca laughing at his jokes like she used to laugh at mine. The timestamps went back 8 months. 8 months of lies. 8 months of working late and board meetings and girls' nights out. My hands were shaking. I closed the laptop and walked to the kitchen, poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon. The good stuff Rebecca bought for entertaining clients like Marcus. The house felt different now, like I was seeing it through new eyes. The fresh flowers on the counter. When had Rebecca started buying fresh flowers? The new lingerie I'd glimpsed in the laundry. Who was that for? The way she'd been going to the gym religiously, coming home glowing and energized, all for him. I finished the bourbon and poured another. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the storm inside my head was just getting started. My phone rang. Sophie. Dad? I'm staying at Mom's hotel tonight. She says you two need space to work things out. Hotel? The word came out strangled. The Marriott downtown. She got a suite for the week. Says the house has too many bad memories. Bad memories. 20 years of marriage, reduced to bad memories. Sure, kiddo. See you tomorrow. Dad, are you okay? You sound weird. I'm fine, Sophie. Just tired. Another lie to add to the collection. But what was one more lie in a house built on them? I hung up and stared at my reflection in the black kitchen window. 42 years old, gray creeping into my brown hair, hands permanently stained with grease and calluses. When had I become the kind of man a woman like Rebecca would be ashamed of? But then I remembered something Frank used to tell me in the ring. It's not about how hard you can hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. I'd been hit hard tonight, but I was still standing, and I was about to start moving forward. The next morning came too early and too bright. I'd spent the night on the couch, bourbon and betrayal making for lousy bedfellows. My head felt like someone had used it for heavy bag practice, and my mouth tasted like I'd been chewing on pennies. Rebecca's coffee maker gurgled mockingly in the kitchen. She'd programmed it the night before, probably out of habit. Even her appliances were more considerate than she was. I showered, shaved, and put on my least wrinkled shirt. If I was going to confront my wife's lover, I might as well look presentable while doing it. The drive to Rebecca's office building took 20 minutes through downtown traffic. 20 minutes to plan what I'd say, how I'd handle seeing them together. 20 minutes that felt like 20 hours. Meridian Corporate Plaza rose 30 stories into the gray morning sky, all glass and steel and corporate ambition. Rebecca's corner office was on the 28th floor, with a view of the city that probably cost more per month than I made in a year. I'd been here exactly 3 times in our marriage. Rebecca preferred to keep her 2 worlds separate. Now I knew why. The security guard in the lobby barely looked up as I signed in. Here to see Mrs. Patterson? Thought I'd surprise her with lunch. I held up the bag from her favorite deli. 2 turkey clubs, extra avocado, the way she used to like them when we were dating. The elevator ride felt endless. My reflection stared back from the polished steel doors, tired eyes, cheap shirt, hands that would never be clean enough for this place. Floor 28. Rebecca's secretary wasn't at her desk. Perfect. I walked down the hallway, my footsteps muffled by carpet that probably cost more than my car. Rebecca's office door was closed, but I could hear voices inside. Her voice, and a man's deeper one. I knocked. Come in, Rebecca called. I opened the door and stepped into her world. Floor-to-ceiling windows, mahogany desk, leather chairs that screamed money. And there, sitting across from my wife like he belonged there, was Marcus Thornton. He was even more impressive in person. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of tan that came from country club golf courses and Caribbean vacations. His suit probably cost more than my mortgage payment. David! Rebecca's voice pitched higher, the way it did when she was nervous. What are you doing here? Brought you lunch. I held up the bag, feeling suddenly ridiculous. Thought you might be hungry. Marcus stood, extending a manicured hand. You must be Rebecca's husband. I'm Marcus Thornton. I've heard so much about you. I bet he had. I shook his hand, noting the firm grip, the expensive watch, the wedding ring tan line where one used to be. Marcus is one of our biggest investors, Rebecca said quickly. We were just discussing the quarterly projections. Fascinating stuff, I'm sure. I set the lunch bag on her desk. Don't let me interrupt your meeting. Actually, Marcus said, checking that expensive watch, I should get going. Lunch appointment across town. He gathered his papers, brushed past me close enough that I could smell his cologne. Probably cost more per ounce than my bourbon. Rebecca, we'll continue this discussion tonight. 8 o'clock? Of course. She didn't look at me when she said it. Marcus paused at the door. Nice meeting you, David. Rebecca's told me you work with cars? I fix things that are broken. I met his eyes. It's what I do. Something flickered across his face. Understanding, maybe, or challenge. After he left, Rebecca and I stared at each other across her mahogany desk. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. How long? I asked. How long what? Don't. My voice came out harder than I intended. I know, Rebecca. I know about Marcus. Her face went white, then red. You know what exactly? I know you've been lying to me for 8 months. I know you're staying at the Marriott. I know you think I'm clueless. She sank into her leather chair, suddenly looking smaller. David, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. I sat down across from her, in the chair Marcus had just vacated, still warm. The question is, what are we going to do about it? I don't know. For the first time in months, she looked at me, really looked at me. I don't know anything anymore. Do you love him? The question hung in the air like smoke. Rebecca stared out her window at the city below, at the world that made sense to her in ways I never could. I think so, she whispered. It hurt worse than I'd expected. Worse than a knockout punch, worse than anything I'd ever felt in the ring. And me? She was quiet for so long I thought she might not answer. I don't know, she said finally. I don't think I've known for a long time. I stood up, legs unsteady. Keep the sandwiches. You'll need your strength. David, wait. But I was already walking away, down the hallway with its expensive carpet, past the secretary who'd returned to her desk and was pretending not to stare, into the elevator that carried me down from Rebecca's world back to mine. The security guard looked up as I signed out. That was quick. She not hungry? She's got other plans, I said. Outside, the city bustled with people who had places to go, purposes to fulfill, lives that made sense. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. My phone buzzed. Text from Sophie. Mom says you're getting divorced. Is it true? I stared at the message until the words blurred. Rebecca hadn't wasted any time spreading the news. Probably wanted to control the narrative, make sure everyone knew it was my fault somehow. I typed back, we're working through some issues. Whatever, I'm staying with Mom until you figure your shit out. My daughter's contempt hit harder than my wife's betrayal. Sophie had always been Rebecca's girl, smart, ambitious, embarrassed by her blue-collar father. Now she had official permission to write me off completely. I drove to Frank's gym, needing to hit something before I did something stupid. The place smelled like sweat and leather and honest work. Frank took one look at my face and pointed toward the heavy bag. Work it out, champ. Then we'll talk. I wrapped my hands and went to work. Left jab, right cross, left hook. The bag absorbed my anger, my humiliation, my 20 years of trying to be good enough for a woman who'd already decided I wasn't. After an hour, Frank handed me a towel and a bottle of water. Feel better? No. Good. Means you're not done yet. He sat on the edge of the ring, studying me with eyes that had seen everything. She cheating? Yeah. You gonna fight for her? I thought about Rebecca in her corner office, Marcus in his expensive suit, Sophie choosing sides without even hearing mine. I don't know if she's worth fighting for anymore. Frank nodded. Then you fight for yourself. Fight for what's right. Fight for what you deserve. What do I deserve, Frank? Better than this. He stood up, old knees creaking. Question is, what are you gonna do about it? I unwrapped my hands, flexing fingers that would probably ache tomorrow. But the ache in my chest was worse, and it wasn't going away anytime soon. I'm going to figure out who Marcus Thornton really is, I said. And then I'm going to make sure Rebecca knows exactly what kind of man she's chosen over me. Frank smiled. Now you're talking like a fighter. 3 days of playing detective taught me that Marcus Thornton was everything I wasn't, and everything Rebecca wanted. Rich, successful, connected to all the right people in all the right ways. His venture capital firm had offices in 3 cities, a client list that read like a Fortune 500 directory, and a reputation for turning struggling companies into gold mines. He also had a weakness for married women and expensive cars. I'd spent those 3 days following him around the city like a lovesick teenager, learning his routines. Morning coffee at Starbucks on 5th Street, lunch at the country club, evening drinks at whatever high-end establishment would stroke his ego. And twice, he'd met Rebecca at the Marriott, staying until well past midnight. My wife was thorough in her betrayal, I'd give her that. But it was the 4th day that changed everything. Thursday morning, I was parked across from Marcus's downtown condo when my phone rang. David? Rebecca's voice sounded strained. We need to talk. I'm listening. Not over the phone. Can you meet me for coffee? That place on Elm Street where we used to go? Cafe Luna. We'd had our first date there 23 years ago. She'd ordered a cappuccino, and I'd been too nervous to drink anything. The irony wasn't lost on me. When? An hour? I looked at Marcus's building. His silver BMW was still in the parking garage. He wouldn't be going anywhere soon. I'll be there. Cafe Luna hadn't changed much. Same mismatched chairs, same local art on the walls, same smell of espresso and broken dreams. Rebecca was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, hands wrapped around a coffee cup, like she was trying to absorb its warmth. She looked tired, older. The corporate armor she usually wore had been replaced by jeans and a sweater that had seen better days. For a moment, she looked like the woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down. Figured I owed you that much. I signaled the waitress for coffee. Black, no sugar. The way I'd been taking it since Rebecca stopped caring about the little things. I've been thinking about what you said, about Marcus, about us, about everything. And? She stared into her cup like it held answers. I think we should try counseling. The coffee arrived. I took a sip, buying time to process what she'd just said. Counseling. Yes, I think we owe it to ourselves, to Sophie, to try and work this out. What about Marcus? Her face flushed. I told him I needed time to think, that we needed to slow things down. Slow things down. I leaned back in my chair. That's one way to put it. David, please. I know I've hurt you. I know I've made mistakes, but we have 20 years together. That has to count for something. 20 years. She was right about that. 20 years of building a life together, of shared dreams and inside jokes and quiet Sunday mornings. 20 years that Marcus Thornton had managed to erase in 8 months. Why now? I asked. Why the sudden change of heart? She was quiet for a long moment. Sophie. She's been asking questions, and I realized how this must look to her. How it must look to everyone. There it was. Not love, not regret, not even guilt. Image management. Rebecca was worried about how her affair looked, not how it felt. So this is about public relations. That's not fair. Isn't it? I finished my coffee and stood up. You're not sorry you had the affair, Rebecca. You're sorry you got caught. David, wait! But I was already walking away, just like I had in her office. The difference was, this time I knew exactly where I was going. Back to Marcus's building. Back to watching and waiting and planning. Because Rebecca was right about one thing. 20 years had to count for something, but not in the way she thought. I parked across the street and settled in to wait. At 11:30, Marcus emerged from the building, checking his phone as he walked to his BMW. I followed him through downtown traffic, staying 3 cars back, until he pulled into the parking lot of an upscale restaurant called Meridian. Through the window, I watched him shake hands with a woman I didn't recognize. Blonde, expensive-looking, the kind of put-together that screamed money. They sat at a corner table, heads close together, her hand occasionally touching his arm. I took photos with my phone. Not great quality, but good enough to prove a point. Marcus Thornton, it seemed, had a type. And that type was married women with something to lose. I followed him for the rest of the day. The blonde woman was just the beginning. At 3 p.m., he met another woman at a wine bar downtown. Brunette this time, but the same expensive look, the same intimate body language. At 6 p.m., he was back at his condo, alone. By the time I got home, I had a phone full of photos and a head full of possibilities. Rebecca's car was in the driveway. She was waiting in the living room when I walked in, still wearing the jeans and sweater from our coffee meeting. "I was hoping we could talk more," she said. "About counseling? About us? About giving this another chance?" I sat down across from her, studying her face. She was beautiful. I'd never denied that. Smart, successful, everything a man was supposed to want in a wife. But she was also a stranger, someone who'd been living a double life so long she'd forgotten which version was real. "I have a question for you," I said. "Okay. Do you think Marcus is faithful to you?" The question caught her off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, do you think you're the only married woman he's sleeping with?" Her face went pale. "David, that's not because I spent the day following him around. Interesting guy, your Marcus. Very social, very friendly with the ladies." I pulled out my phone, scrolled through the photos. This is him with a blonde at lunch, very cozy. And this is him with a brunette at happy hour, also very cozy. Rebecca stared at the photos like they were written in a foreign language. "He told me he loved me," she whispered. "I'm sure he did. I'm sure he tells all of them that." She sank back into the couch, the fight going out of her like air from a punctured tire. "I'm such an idiot." "No," I said. "You're just human. You wanted something different, something exciting. I get it." "Do you?" I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. "Yeah, I do. I just wish you'd talk to me before you decided to blow up our marriage." "I'm sorry." The words came out broken, barely audible. "God, David, I'm so sorry." For a moment, I almost believed her, almost reached across the space between us and pulled her into my arms, the way I had 1,000 times before, almost forgave her everything because forgiveness was easier than the alternative. But then I remembered Marcus's smug smile, Sophie's contempt, the way Rebecca had looked at me in her office like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe. Some things couldn't be fixed with an apology. "I know you are," I said, "but sorry doesn't change what happened. Sorry doesn't give us back what we lost." "So what happens now?" I stood up, suddenly exhausted. "Now we figure out how to end this with whatever dignity we have left." "David, I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight. Tomorrow we'll call lawyers and figure out the details." I walked upstairs, leaving her alone with her regrets and my photographs. Through the thin walls I could hear her crying, soft sobs that might have broken my heart a week ago. Now they just sounded like the end of everything I'd thought I wanted. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by a kid who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I signed for them at the front door, still wearing yesterday's clothes and 3 days of stubble. The kid avoided eye contact, probably thinking I was the kind of guy who shot messengers. He wasn't entirely wrong. Rebecca had moved fast, faster than I'd expected, even knowing what I knew about her efficiency. The papers were thorough, professionally prepared, and completely one-sided. She wanted the house, half my business, and full custody of Sophie. She also wanted me to disappear quietly, without making a fuss about Marcus or the affair or the way she'd blown up 20 years of marriage for a man who collected wives like golf trophies. I called my lawyer, Jim Morrison, no relation to the rock star, as he reminded everyone who asked. Jim had handled my business incorporation and a few other legal matters over the years. He was good, but he wasn't a killer. Rebecca's lawyer was. "She's asking for a lot," Jim said after reviewing the papers. "The house, the business assets, custody. What's she giving you in return?" "My freedom, apparently." "David, I have to ask, is there anything she could use against you? Any reason she'd feel confident making demands like this?" I thought about the photos on my phone, the evidence of Marcus's other affairs, the ammunition I'd been gathering for weeks. "No," I said, "but I've got plenty I could use against her." "Such as?" "Adultery, multiple affairs. Her boyfriend's got a history of seducing married women." Jim was quiet for a moment. "You have proof?" "Photos, dates, times, enough to make her life very uncomfortable if it came out." "Then why isn't she worried about that?" It was a good question. Rebecca was many things, but stupid wasn't one of them. She had to know I'd figured out her affair, had to know I could make things difficult for her, unless she thought she had something bigger on me. "I need to make some calls," I told Jim. "Don't respond to her lawyer yet." "David, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking my wife's playing chess while I've been playing checkers." I drove to Frank's gym, needing to think and sweat in equal measure. The place was busier than usual, afternoon crowd working off their lunch and their frustrations. I found an empty, heavy bag and went to work. Jab, cross, hook. The rhythm was meditative, hypnotic. Each punch was a question, each impact an answer I didn't like. Why was Rebecca so confident? What did she think she had on me? What was I missing? "You're dropping your left," Frank said, appearing beside the bag like he always did when I needed him most. "My left's fine. Your left's sloppy. Your head's somewhere else." He held the bag steady. "Talk to me." I told him about the divorce papers, about Rebecca's demands, about the feeling that I was walking into a trap I couldn't see. "You trust this lawyer of yours?" "Jim's good people. Not a shark, but honest." "Maybe you need a shark." "Maybe." I threw another combination, harder this time. "Or maybe I need to figure out what Rebecca thinks she knows. Could be she's bluffing. Rich people do that, act like they hold all the cards even when they're holding nothing." "Could be." But I didn't think so. Rebecca wasn't the bluffing type. My phone rang. "Sophie." "Dad, we need to talk." "I'm listening." "Not over the phone. Can you pick me up from school?" I checked my watch. 2:30. "Aren't you supposed to be in class?" "I'm in the counselor's office. Mom told them about the divorce. They think I need emotional support." The way she said it made it sound like a disease. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. I unwrapped my hands, grabbed my keys, and headed for the door. "David," Frank called after me, "whatever your wife thinks she's got on you, don't let her use your kid as a weapon." "I won't." But as I drove toward Sophie's school, I wondered if I'd have a choice. Lincoln High looked the same as it had when I'd graduated 25 years earlier. Same red brick, same tired landscaping, same sense of barely contained chaos. Sophie was waiting by the main entrance, backpack slung over one shoulder, face set in the expression of teenage resignation she'd perfected over the past year. She got in the truck without a word, staring straight ahead as I pulled out of the parking lot. "Where to?" I asked. "Anywhere but home." I drove toward the lake, to the park where I'd taught her to ride a bike, where we'd fed ducks and talked about everything and nothing. The place felt smaller now, worn down by time and neglect, like everything else in my life. We sat on a bench overlooking the water. Sophie pulled her knees up to her chest, making herself small. "Mom says you're being unreasonable about the divorce." "What else does Mom say?" "That you're angry and trying to hurt her. that you're making demands you know she can't meet. I turned to look at my daughter, really look at her. She had Rebecca's eyes, my stubborn chin, and an expression that suggested she was tired of being caught in the middle of her parents' war. Sophie, what do you know about Marcus? He's Mom's friend. He's nice. Just a friend? She was quiet for a long moment. I'm not stupid, Dad. I know they're together. I've known for months. And you're okay with that? I'm okay with Mom being happy. She looked at me then, and I saw Rebecca in her face, the same ability to justify anything that served her purposes. She hasn't been happy for a long time. Because of me. Because of both of you. Sophie's voice was matter-of-fact, brutal in its honesty. You guys have been like strangers living in the same house. At least, now she smiles sometimes. It hurt more than I'd expected. Not because she was wrong, but because she was right. What about you? I asked. Are you happy? I'm 17. I'm not supposed to be happy. Despite everything, I smiled. Fair point. Dad? Her voice got smaller. Are you going to fight this? The divorce, I mean? Do you want me to? I want you to do whatever makes you stop looking so sad all the time. We sat in silence, watching the lake lap against the shore. A family of ducks paddled by, the parents flanking their offspring, protecting them from whatever dangers lurked beneath the surface. Sophie, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Okay. Has your mother said anything about me? About things I might have done wrong? Anything that might make her think she has an advantage in the divorce? Sophie frowned. What kind of things? I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out. She talks to Marcus about you sometimes. I've heard them on the phone. What do they say? Mostly just that you're stubborn and won't accept that it's over, but... She hesitated. But what? Last week, Marcus said something about having friends who could help if you became a problem. Mom told him that wouldn't be necessary, that you'd do the right thing eventually. Friends who could help. I didn't like the sound of that. Sophie, has Marcus ever made you uncomfortable? Ever done or said anything that seemed wrong? No, nothing like that. He mostly ignores me. But Dad? She turned to face me fully. I don't think he's as nice as Mom thinks he is. Why not? Just a feeling. The way he looks at people sometimes, like he's figuring out how to use them. And he lies about stupid stuff. Like, he told Mom he was divorced, but I saw him slip off a wedding ring once when he thought no one was looking. My blood went cold. Are you sure? Pretty sure. It left a tan line. Marcus Thornton wasn't just a serial cheater. He was still married, which meant Rebecca wasn't just having an affair. She was the other woman in someone else's marriage. And if I knew Rebecca, she had no idea. I dropped Sophie back at school and drove straight to the public library, needing internet access that couldn't be traced back to me. The reference librarian, a woman who looked like she'd been stamping books since the Dewey Decimal System was invented, pointed me toward a computer terminal in the back corner. It took me 20 minutes to find what I was looking for. Marcus Thornton wasn't divorced. He was married to Catherine Thornton, née Williams, daughter of real estate mogul Richard Williams. The wedding announcement was in the society pages from 5 years ago, all smiles and champagne and promises of forever. More interesting were the photos from charity events over the past 2 years. Marcus and Catherine, the perfect power couple, his arm around her waist, her hand on his chest. The most recent was from 3 months ago, a cancer research fundraiser where they donated $50,000 and posed for pictures with the mayor. 3 months ago, right in the middle of his affair with my wife. I printed everything I could find, stuffing the pages into a manila envelope like evidence for a trial, which, in a way, they were. My phone buzzed. Text from Rebecca. Can we talk? I'm at the house. Perfect timing. I found her in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a cup of tea and a stack of real estate brochures. She looked up when I walked in, and for a moment, her face showed something that might have been hope. I've been thinking about what you said, she began. About dignity, about ending this the right way. Have you now? I think we can work something out, something that's fair to both of us. I sat down across from her, the envelope on the table between us like a loaded gun. What did you have in mind? I keep the house, you keep the business. We split custody of Sophie, and we both move on with our lives. Clean, simple, no lawyers getting rich off our misery. And Marcus? Her face flushed. What about him? Does he factor into this new arrangement? That's not your concern anymore. I opened the envelope, spread the printouts across the table, wedding photos, charity events, society page mentions. Rebecca stared at them like they were written in hieroglyphics. What is this? This is your boyfriend's wife. The color drained from her face. That's impossible. Marcus is divorced. Marcus is a lot of things. Divorced isn't one of them. She picked up the wedding announcement, hands shaking. This has to be old. From before. Check the dates, Rebecca. The most recent photo is from 3 months ago. 3 months. She studied the pictures, and I watched 20 years of marriage collapse into this moment. My wife realizing she'd been played by a man who was even better at lying than she was. He told me he was divorced, she whispered. He told you a lot of things, I'm sure. The investment in my company, the plans we made. She looked up at me, eyes wide with something that might have been panic. Oh God, David, what have I done? You had an affair with a married man who's probably had affairs with dozens of married women. You're not special, Rebecca. You're just convenient. She started crying then, the kind of ugly, desperate sobs that come from realizing you've destroyed everything for nothing. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to be the husband I'd been for 20 years. But a bigger part of me just felt empty. What am I going to do? She asked. That depends. What were you planning to do when you thought you held all the cards? She wiped her eyes with a napkin, trying to pull herself together. I don't know what you mean. Sure you do. The divorce papers, the demands, the confidence that I'd just roll over and give you everything you wanted. What did Marcus promise you? Nothing. He didn't promise anything. But she wouldn't meet my eyes when she said it. Rebecca, I've known you for 23 years. I know when you're lying. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the photos of Marcus and his real wife. He said he had connections, people who could make problems go away if you tried to fight the divorce. What kind of problems? Business problems, licensing issues, tax audits, the kind of things that could destroy someone who works with their hands. There it was. Marcus hadn't just been sleeping with my wife. He'd been threatening my livelihood. And you were okay with that? I thought... She shook her head. I thought you'd just accept it and move on. I thought it would be easier for everyone. Easier for you, you mean? Yes. She looked at me then, and for the first time in months, I saw the woman I'd married. Flawed, selfish, but human. I wanted out, David. I wanted out of this house, this life, this version of myself that I'd become. Marcus offered me something different. He offered you lies. I know that now. I gathered up the photos, put them back in the envelope. So what happens now? I don't know. I have to think. While you're thinking, you might want to consider something else. What? Catherine Thornton, Marcus's actual wife. She deserves to know what kind of man she's married to. Rebecca's face went white. You wouldn't. Why not? She's in the same position I was in 6 months ago. Married to someone who's lying to her, betraying her, making a fool of her. Don't you think she has a right to know? David, please. If this comes out, it'll destroy my career. The board, the investors, they'll never trust me again. Should they? She didn't have an answer for that. I stood up, suddenly tired of the whole conversation. I'm going to Frank's gym. When I get back, I want you gone. Back to your hotel, back to Marcus, back to whatever life you think you want. But I want you out of this house. What about Sophie? Sophie can decide for herself where she wants to be, but she's going to know the truth about what happened here, all of it. David. 20 years, Rebecca. 20 years I loved you, supported you, tried to be the husband you needed, and you threw it all away for a man who was using you the same way he's used God knows how many other women. I walked toward the door, then stopped. Oh, and Rebecca, those friends of Marcus's who were going to help with my problems. You might want to ask yourself what kind of man needs friends like that, and what he might do to protect his real marriage when his wife finds out about you. I left her sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by the wreckage of her carefully planned future. For the first time in months, I felt something that might have been hope. Not for our marriage, that was dead and buried, but for what came next, because I was done being the victim in this story. Catherine Thornton lived in a house that belonged in a magazine. Tudor style, perfectly landscaped, the kind of place where the mailbox probably cost more than most people's cars. I sat in my truck across the street for 20 minutes, working up the nerve to walk up that brick pathway and destroy another marriage. But then, I thought about Rebecca in her hotel room, probably calling Marcus right now to tell him about our conversation. Thought about the friends who could make my problems disappear. Thought about 20 years of marriage reduced to legal documents and property division. Some marriages deserve to be destroyed. Catherine answered the door herself. She was smaller than she looked in the photos, with graying blonde hair and kind eyes that reminded me of my mother. She wore gardening gloves and had dirt on her knees, like she'd been working in the flower beds that lined her perfect driveway. "Can I help you?" "Mrs. Thornton, my name is David Patterson. I think we need to talk about your husband." Her face changed, the kindness replaced by something harder. "I see. Please, come in." She led me through a living room that looked like a furniture showroom into a kitchen that was bigger than my entire downstairs. Everything was white and clean and expensive, the kind of kitchen Rebecca had always wanted. "Coffee?" Catherine asked, already moving toward a machine that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. "Please." She made coffee with the efficiency of someone who'd been entertaining strangers with bad news for years. When she set the cup in front of me, her hands were steady. "How long have you known?" I asked. "About the affairs? 2 years? About your wife specifically? 3 months?" The matter-of-fact way she said it caught me off guard. "You've known for 2 years?" Marcus isn't as careful as he thinks he is. Credit card statements, hotel receipts, phone calls at odd hours. I'm not stupid, Mr. Patterson. "Then why haven't I left him?" She sat down across from me, cradling her coffee cup. "Because divorce is expensive and prenups are ironclad, and I've grown accustomed to a certain lifestyle." Her honesty was brutal and refreshing. "Besides," she continued, "Marcus always comes home eventually. The affairs never last. He gets bored, they get demanding, and he moves on to the next one. This one might be different." "No, it won't be. Your wife isn't special, Mr. Patterson. None of them are. They're just diversions." I pulled out my phone, showed her the photos I'd taken of Marcus with the blonde and the brunette. "He's not just seeing my wife." Catherine studied the pictures without expression. "The blonde is Jennifer Morrison, wife of a city councilman. The brunette is Sarah Chen, married to a federal judge. Marcus has been seeing both of them for months. And you're okay with this?" "I'm realistic about it." She handed back my phone. "Marcus needs to feel powerful, important, irresistible. Seducing married women feeds that need. As long as he's discreet and doesn't embarrass me publicly, I look the other way." "What about when he's not discreet?" Something flickered in her eyes. "What do you mean?" "My wife thinks he's going to leave you for her. She's talking about investments in her company, about building a future together." "That doesn't sound very discreet." Catherine was quiet for a long moment. "No, it doesn't." She also mentioned that Marcus has friends who can make problems disappear. people who could hurt someone's business if they became inconvenient. Ah, Catherine set down her coffee cup. You've met Marcus's business associates. I haven't met anyone. But they've been mentioned as a possibility, a threat to keep you in line during the divorce proceedings. Something like that. Catherine stood up, walked to the window overlooking her perfect backyard. Mr. Patterson, my husband isn't just a venture capitalist. He's also involved in some businesses that operate in gray areas, import-export companies that don't ask too many questions about their cargo, real estate deals that happen very quickly and quietly, the kind of businesses that require a certain type of associate. You're saying he's connected to criminals? I'm saying he knows people who solve problems in ways that don't involve lawyers or courts. A chill ran down my spine. Has he ever used these people before? Once, a business partner who wanted to expose some irregularities in Marcus's books. The man's restaurant suffered a series of unfortunate incidents, break-ins, health department violations, a small fire in the kitchen. He decided to relocate to another state. And you stayed married to him. I stayed married to his money and his connections and the life he provides. She turned back to me. But I won't stay married to a man who's stupid enough to threaten federal judges and city councilmen through their wives. What do you mean? Jennifer Morrison's husband chairs the city planning committee. Sarah Chen's husband oversees federal racketeering cases. If Marcus is using his relationships with their wives to gain inside information or influence, he's not just cheating, he's committing federal crimes. The pieces were falling into place. Marcus wasn't just a serial adulterer. He was using his affairs to build a network of influence and information, trading intimacy for access to power. What about my wife? What does she do? She's CEO of a mid-sized consulting firm. Government contracts, corporate restructuring. Catherine nodded. Government contracts. Yes, that would be useful to Marcus. So what happens now? Now you have a choice, Mr. Patterson. You can walk away, accept whatever settlement your wife offers, and hope that Marcus's friends don't decide you're a problem worth solving. Or you can help me destroy him. The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of expensive appliances. Catherine Thornton stood by her window, looking out at her perfect life, offering to burn it all down. Why would you do that? Because I'm tired, she said simply. Tired of pretending, tired of looking the other way, tired of being married to a man who thinks he's untouchable. What did you have in mind? She smiled, and for the first time since I'd arrived, she looked genuinely happy. I have copies of everything, Mr. Patterson. Financial records, phone logs, photographs, recordings, 20 years of marriage to a man who thinks I'm just a pretty decoration who doesn't pay attention. You've been gathering evidence. I've been protecting myself, but evidence can serve many purposes. I thought about Rebecca, probably sitting in her hotel room right now, planning her future with a man who was using her for government contracts and inside information. Thought about Sophie, caught in the middle of a divorce that was about to get very complicated. Thought about Marcus's friends and their creative problem-solving methods. What do you need from me? Access to your wife's communications with Marcus. Phone records, emails, text messages, anything that shows the connection between their affair and her business dealings. That's illegal. So is using pillow talk to influence government contracts. Catherine sat back down, all business now. Mr. Patterson, your wife has involved herself in something much bigger than a simple affair. If Marcus goes down, and he will go down, she's going down with him unless we can prove she was an unwitting participant. And if I help you? Then we both get what we want. I get my freedom, and half of everything Marcus has hidden in offshore accounts. You get your wife back from the federal prosecutors who are going to be very interested in her company's government contracts. I finished my coffee, thinking. Catherine Thornton was offering me a chance to save Rebecca from herself, to protect Sophie from having her mother go to prison, and to make sure Marcus's friends never became my problem. All I had to do was betray my wife one more time. I'll need to think about it. Of course. But don't think too long, Mr. Patterson. Marcus is already nervous about your conversation with your wife. He's going to want to tie up loose ends soon. She walked me to the door, the perfect hostess saying goodbye to an old friend. Mrs. Thornton, why are you really doing this? She smiled sadly. Because 20 years ago I was your wife, young, ambitious, seduced by a powerful man who promised me everything. The difference is, I married him. I've spent 20 years paying for that mistake. And now? Now I'm going to make him pay for it instead. I drove home through streets that looked different somehow, like I was seeing my city through new eyes. Everything was the same, but everything had changed. Rebecca's affair wasn't just about a marriage falling apart. It was about corruption, influence peddling, and federal crimes. And somehow, I was right in the middle of it all. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. Rebecca. David, we need to talk. Something's happened. I'm listening. Not over the phone. Can you meet me at the hotel? I looked at my house, at the life I'd built with a woman who'd traded it all for a man who collected wives like trophies and used them like tools. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Because ready or not, it was time for the final act of this particular tragedy. And I was done being just a supporting character in my own story. The Marriott downtown had the kind of lobby that whispered money. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and furniture that cost more than most people's cars. Rebecca was waiting by the elevator, wearing a black dress that I'd bought her for our 15th anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on me. She looked terrible. Her makeup couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes, and her hands shook as she pressed the button for the 18th floor. Marcus knows you came to see me, she said as the elevator climbed. I figured he would. He's angry, really angry. About the photos? About everything. The elevator dinged, and the doors opened onto a hallway lined with expensive carpet and bad art. He says you're trying to destroy his life. Funny, I thought he already did that when he decided to sleep with my wife. Rebecca's room was a suite, all floor-to-ceiling windows and furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. Marcus was standing by the window, looking out at the city like he owned it. He turned when we walked in, and I saw something in his eyes that I didn't like. David, I was hoping we could have a conversation. About what? About boundaries. About what happens when people cross lines they shouldn't cross. I sat down in one of the expensive chairs, making myself comfortable. Such as harassing my wife. Your wife? I looked at Rebecca, who was standing by the door like she was thinking about running. That's interesting. Because last time I checked, you were still married to Catherine. Marcus's face went red. My personal life is none of your business. It became my business when you made it part of my wife's personal life. David, please, Rebecca said. Let's just talk about this rationally. I'm being perfectly rational. I looked around the suite, taking in the champagne bucket, the room service cart, the unmade bed visible through the bedroom door. Nice place. Who's paying for it? I am, Rebecca said quickly. With what money? Your salary or the company funds you've been moving around to impress your boyfriend here? Marcus stepped away from the window. That's enough. Is it? Because I'm just getting started. I stood up, and Marcus tensed like he was expecting a fight. See, I've been doing some research on you, Marcus. Very interesting stuff. David, don't, Rebecca whispered. Did you know he's still married, Rebecca? Did you know about Jennifer Morrison and Sarah Chen? Did you know about the offshore accounts and the business associates who solve problems with baseball bats? Marcus's face had gone from red to white. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Because your wife was very informative. Lovely woman, by the way. Much classier than I expected. You talked to Catherine? We had coffee, discussed your hobby of seducing married women for fun and profit. She's surprisingly understanding about the whole thing. Marcus was moving now, crossing the room toward me with the kind of controlled violence that said he'd done this before. You need to stop talking. Or what? You'll have your friends pay me a visit? Burn down my garage? Audit my taxes? I smiled, enjoying the look of panic in his eyes. Here's the thing, Marcus. I know about all of it. The money laundering, the influence peddling, the way you use your affairs to get inside information on government contracts. David, Rebecca said, and her voice sounded strange. How do you know all this? I looked at her, standing there in her black dress, finally understanding that she'd been played by a professional. Because your boyfriend isn't just a cheater, Rebecca. He's a criminal, and you've been helping him commit federal crimes. The room went silent, except for the sound of traffic 18 floors below. Rebecca sank into a chair like her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. That's not true, she whispered. The government contracts your company has been winning lately. The inside information about zoning changes and planning committee decisions. Where do you think that came from? She looked at Marcus, and I saw the moment when everything clicked into place. You used me. Rebecca, it's not like that. You used me. She was on her feet now, years of suppressed anger finally finding a target. You made me think you loved me, and you were just using me for information. I do love you. You're married. That's complicated. It's not complicated. She was screaming now, 20 years of being the perfect CEO finally cracking apart. You're a liar and a cheat and a criminal. Marcus grabbed her arm, hard enough to leave marks. You need to calm down. That's when I hit him. I'd been wanting to hit him for months, and when I saw his hand on my wife's arm, all the restraint I'd been practicing went out the window. It was a good punch, clean and hard, catching him on the jaw and sending him stumbling backward into the expensive furniture. He went down hard, blood streaming from his mouth, looking up at me with something that might have been fear. Don't touch her, I said. Rebecca was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. David, pack your things. We're leaving. I can't just... Yes, you can. I looked down at Marcus, who was struggling to sit up. Your boyfriend here is about to have some very serious conversations with some very serious people. You don't want to be here when that happens. Marcus wiped blood from his mouth. This isn't over. Yeah, it is. I pulled out my phone, showed him the recording app that had been running since I walked into the room. Everything you just said, everything you just admitted to, it's all here, and copies are already on their way to some very interested parties. His face went white. You can't. I can, and I did. I helped Rebecca gather her things, stuffing clothes into her suitcase without regard for organization. Your wife sends her regards, by the way. She's looking forward to her new life as a very wealthy widow. Catherine wouldn't... Catherine already has. Federal prosecutors are very interested in men who use pillow talk to manipulate government contracts. Something about national security implications. I zipped up Rebecca's suitcase and headed for the door. She followed me like she was in a trance, moving on autopilot. David, wait! Marcus called after us. I turned back. He was still on the floor, blood on his expensive shirt, looking like what he'd always been under the polish, a small, cruel man who'd finally run out of people to use. 20 years, I said. 20 years I loved her, protected her, tried to be the husband she deserved. You destroyed that in 8 months. I hope it was worth it. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You're a predator who preys on lonely women and uses them for your own gain. The only thing I don't understand is how it took me so long to see it. I walked out, Rebecca beside me, leaving Marcus Thornton alone in his expensive suite with his expensive lies and his very expensive problems. In the elevator, Rebecca finally spoke. What happens now? Now we go home and figure out how to put our family back together. Can we? After everything that's happened? I looked at her reflection in the polished steel doors. She looked older, sadder, but somehow more real than she had in years. "I don't know," I said, "but we're going to try." The elevator reached the ground floor, and the doors opened onto the marble lobby with its crystal chandeliers and whispered promises of wealth and power. We walked through it all and out into the real world, where the air was cleaner and the light was brighter, and the future was whatever we decided to make it. Behind us, Marcus Thornton's empire was about to come crashing down, and for the first time in months, I was okay with that. 3 months later, I was back in my garage, hands deep in the engine of a 1969 Camaro that had seen better decades. The work was honest, straightforward. Find the problem, fix it, move on to the next one. Unlike marriage, cars didn't lie to you about what was broken. The federal investigation had moved fast once Catherine Thornton provided her evidence. Marcus was facing charges for money laundering, racketeering, and using interstate commerce to facilitate bribery. His business associates had scattered like roaches when the lights came on, leaving him to face the music alone. Rebecca had been questioned, but not charged. The prosecutors believed her story, that she'd been an unwitting participant in Marcus's schemes, seduced and manipulated rather than complicit. Her company had lost several government contracts, but she'd kept her freedom and most of her reputation. The marriage counseling was harder than either of us had expected. "Trust isn't something you rebuild overnight," Dr. Martinez had told us during our first session. "It's a daily choice made by both parties over and over again." Rebecca was trying. I could see it in the way she answered her phone in front of me now, the way she left her laptop open, the way she'd given me passwords to accounts I'd never asked to see. But trying wasn't the same as succeeding, and some days the weight of what she'd done felt too heavy for both of us to carry. Sophie was the surprise in all of this. I'd expected her to blame me for destroying her mother's affair, for dragging our family through a public scandal. Instead, she'd moved back home and started talking to me again, really talking, not just the obligatory check-ins we'd been doing for years. "I'm proud of you," she'd said one night over dinner, "for fighting back, for not just rolling over and taking it. Your mother's not the villain here, Sophie. She made mistakes, but she cheated on you for 8 months, Dad, with a criminal. That's not a mistake. That's a choice." Rebecca had left the table then, and I'd found her crying in our bedroom, the bedroom we were sharing again, though the space between us in bed felt like an ocean some nights. "She hates me," Rebecca had whispered. "She's 17. She hates everyone right now. She has good reason to hate me." I couldn't argue with that. The Camaro's engine turned over on the third try, purring like it had been waiting 20 years for someone to show it some attention. I smiled despite myself. Some things could be fixed, even after decades of neglect. "Sounds good." I turned to find Rebecca standing in the garage doorway, wearing jeans and one of my old t-shirts. She looked younger like this, more like the woman I'd married than the CEO who'd been living in my house like a stranger. "Thanks. She's been a long project." "Like us?" "Something like that." Rebecca walked over to the workbench, running her fingers along tools that had been my father's and his father's before him. 3 generations of men who'd worked with their hands, fixed things that were broken, built things that lasted. "I got a call from Catherine Thornton today," she said. "Yeah?" "The divorce is final. She got everything. The house, the business, the offshore accounts. Marcus is going to prison with nothing but his legal bills." "Good." She wanted to thank us. Said we gave her the courage to finally fight back. I wiped my hands on a rag, studying my wife's face. "How do you feel about that?" "Grateful, I think. If you hadn't found out about his other affairs, if Catherine hadn't had all that evidence, I could have ended up in prison too. But you didn't. Because you saved me." She looked at me then, really looked at me, the way she used to when we were young and everything seemed possible. "Why did you do that? After everything I put you through, why did you save me?" It was a good question. I'd asked myself the same thing during the long nights when sleep wouldn't come, when the anger and hurt felt like acid in my chest. Because despite everything, I still love you, I said. And because Sophie needs her mother. Do you think we can make this work? I don't know. Some days I think we can. Other days you remember what I did. Other days I remember that trust, once broken, doesn't heal the same way a marriage does. Sometimes the repair is stronger than the original. Sometimes it's just a scar. Rebecca nodded, tears in her eyes. Dr. Martinez says it'll take time. Dr. Martinez is right. And you're willing to give it that time? I looked at her, really looked at her, for what felt like the first time in years. She was older, sadder, marked by the choices she'd made and their consequences. But she was also here, in my garage, wearing my t-shirt, asking for something she had no right to expect and every reason to hope for. Yeah, I said. I'm willing to give it time. She smiled then, the first real smile I'd seen from her since before Marcus Thornton had walked into our lives and blown everything apart. I love you, she said. I know. Do you love me? It was the question I'd been avoiding for months, the one that mattered more than all the counseling sessions and legal proceedings and public scandals combined. I'm learning to love you again, I said. The woman you are now, not the woman you were before. It's different, but maybe different is what we need. She kissed me then, soft and tentative, like she was afraid I might disappear. I kissed her back, tasting salt tears and possibility, and the faint hope that some things, once broken, could indeed be repaired. When we broke apart, she rested her forehead against mine. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making this up to you. No, I said. You're going to spend the rest of your life being the wife I deserve. There's a difference. She nodded, understanding. Outside, the sun was setting over our neighborhood, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Mrs. Pruitt was watering her garden, probably listening to every word we'd said. Sophie was upstairs doing homework, music playing loud enough to rattle the windows. It was ordinary, domestic, real in ways that Marcus Thornton's expensive suite had never been. It was home, and for the first time in months, that felt like enough. The Camaro's engine ticked as it cooled, a steady rhythm like a heartbeat. Tomorrow I'd take it for a test drive, see how it handled the road after all those years of sitting idle. Some things were worth the wait. Some things were worth fighting for. And some things, once you'd done the work to fix them properly, ran better than they ever had before.